At this point in the police's effort to arrest the man with the sword, the man had already killed one person and seriously injured 4 others. Who was this samurai sword-wielding antagonist? Why had he just done what he'd just done, which, to remind you, includes an act of murder? Could the man's vicious acts have been prevented? Born on the 11th of April 1988 in South Brazil, Marcus Monzo came over to the UK from America in 2013. A practitioner of jiu-jitsu, Monzo was, in fact, into all things martial arts, including Bushido, the way of the warrior, the samurai warrior to be exact. Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the story so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. When, on the 4th of April 2024, Monzo received the samurai sword that he had recently ordered, he was clearly bursting with excitement over it. And Wizard is the name of Monzo's pet cat, who you're about to meet.
And this just came through the post. And this is very ninja stuff. This is more like my size. Freaking awesome, look at this. This is handmade in Japan. Took more than a month to reach me. Ooh. Freaking sexy. Ooh. Oh my god. Whoa.
Fast forward around 4 weeks to the morning of the 30th of April 2024, Monzo got up, showered, got dressed, strangled Wizard, his pet cat, skinned him, deboned the corpse and placed it on a baking tray, apparently with the intention of cooking and eating it. And if this is giving you Scarlet Blake vibes, you're not alone. My video on that murder case is linked below. Getting back to this murder case, having suddenly got the idea that none other than an apocalypse was about to unravel, the perpetrator now felt that he had no time for his planned meal. After subsequently loading the baking tray, carrying the remains of his pet cat into his van, his reason for doing so I honestly can't say, the man then packed into his vehicle his swords, a kitchen knife and a BB gun. He then drove the 11 miles that lay between his Canning Town flat and Hainault, the reason for his choice of location again being wholly unknown. At 6:51 a.m, the perpetrator spotted, as he drove through Lane Close, a man walking down the street and promptly drove straight into him. While the man, whose name is Donato Iwule, went flying, the perpetrator's own van ploughed into the property in front of it. Having miraculously escaped any serious injuries from the van attack of the perpetrators, Donato was able to get back to his feet and approach the perpetrator as the man climbed out of the van, and then ask him if he was okay. The perpetrator's response was to announce to the stranger that he had just driven into that he needed to kill him, and then to follow this up by slashing the man in the neck.
My survival skills kick in. So I saw this guy, I went to him, I said, "Are you okay?" He didn't talk to me, he was angry. I said, "Yeah, I need to kill." I was like, "Huh? Who are you killing?" Hello?
Donato later learned from a paramedic that if he hadn't stemmed the bleeding from his neck, he would have died. Doorbell camera footage caught Donato screaming as he ran down the road. He is, in fact, one of the people out on the street at that point who, on seeing a schoolboy who had just left his house walking down the road, shouted out to him that someone wielding a sword was running up to him. The boy, however, 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin, was listening to whatever was playing through his headphones. He didn't hear the warning calls. He had no idea then that some cannabis-fueled maniac, who had since caught up to him, had just raised a samurai sword high in the air and then driven it with all his might into his neck. Hey, We'll soon be talking about the perpetrator's multi-variety drug addiction. The boy was unconscious when, moments later, the perpetrator plunged the sword into the boy's chest before then dragging the boy by none other than his school bag a few feet along the ground. This was basically an execution, the perpetrator, you see, having all but decapitated the schoolboy. This horrific moment was caught on camera by an eyewitness.
He just killed that boy. He just killed him.
By this point, the police and ambulance had both been called, the latter being the first to arrive. However, they immediately drove a distance away as the perpetrator jumped out on them and began attacking the ambulance vehicle with his sword. Around a minute later, the first police car arrived on scene, rapidly followed by a second, and the officers came face to face with the perpetrator. This, however, didn't stop the man waving the sword around while screaming, quote, "Is there anybody here who believes in God?" unquote. He repeated that question, in fact, all through his rampage. In just about all the videos on this horrific story that you might watch, you'll see comment after comment deploring the fact that the first police officers to arrive only had pava spray, which is similar to pepper spray, to use on the perpetrator. The police came to a sword fight with pepper spray.
Yellow jacket bar. Move.
Mate, drop that now! Drop it! Drop it now! Drop it! Drop it now! Drop it! Drop the sword! Drop the sword! Line close, more units! Drop it now!
Units line close, make control.
There's anybody here who believes in God?
Drop it!
Are there gods here?
Drop!
Are there gods or gods?
Drop it!
Drop it! Drop it!
Drop it now!
On subsequently being chased by officers down an alleyway, the killer responded by swiftly turning around and attacking PC Yasmin Mechem Whitfield, bringing the sword down on her 3 times, getting her in the head, the arm and the wrist. The wound to her head was of such force that it caused a compound skull fracture. The wound to her left arm could have caused fatal bleeding, and the wound to her left wrist caused a complete division of the nerves, as well as serious muscle damage. At that point, PC King, who didn't even have a taser, put himself between his colleague and the assailant, very probably, said the judge of the perpetrator's trial, saving the woman's life. I don't know why the perpetrator didn't stab PC King. He may have chosen to take flight instead. I'm glad he didn't stab the police officer though, of course. Shockingly, even with the police at his heels, the perpetrator went in hunt of further victims, finding, as he soon did, an unlocked back door and entering the home into which it led. It was the home of a man by the name of Henry Polania, who was in bed with his wife, Cindy Arias. The couple's 4-year-old daughter was asleep in the next room. Henry and Cindy themselves abruptly woke up to find a crazed maniac standing over them with a samurai sword and shouting about God. When the perpetrator, who had raised the sword high above his head, went to bring it down with all his might in the direction of Cindy's neck, Henry intercepted it with his bare hands. This was the moment when the couple's daughter walked into her parents' room crying. In response, after taking 2 steps back from Henry and Cindy, the antagonist pointed the end of the sword towards the face of each of the family members in turn before saying, quote, "I'm just going to let you live because of your little one," unquote. He then left. Henry, meanwhile, was left losing large amounts of blood from his hands as a result of his act from moments before of grabbing the blade of the perpetrator's sword. When they saw the madman, whose long-standing obsession with conspiracy theories had long since caused him to detach from reality, and who had killed his own pet cat, Wizard, because he thought that it was controlling his mind, running down Lane Close, then turning onto New North Road, the police feared that he was heading towards Hainault Underground Station, which would be busy with commuters who would all be at risk of being murdered. The whole expose of the perpetrator's deranged beliefs and his decade-long insanity is coming right up, in case you wondered. The police were in fact wrong. The madman, who didn't seem to have any sort of plan, suddenly turned round and walked into Thurlow Gardens. He was soon cornered by police against some garages, the police officers once again making an attempt to subdue him with pava spray. Inspector Malloy Campbell himself approached the maniac with his police baton out and raised it to try and disarm the attacker. Inspector Campbell later reported, quote, "He started closing down the distance quickly, flashing with his sword. He was flashing at me and I was hitting him, and my baton hit his sword in midair. We clipped each other. He went across the top of my chest and cut off part of my body on camera. We then went back to each other and hit each other, and that was the point where the blade came across my arm, cutting my fleece and then nicking my hand on the way out." Unquote.
I spray him first, and as I'm spraying him, he blocks the stream of pava, and then he closes down the distance between him and I very quickly, slashing at the sword. So I had my baton up by the time that he got to me, and we hit each other. He slashed at me and he went through some of the equipment on my vest, and I hit him, but not with enough force. And so we then went back at each other, and I think a couple of times my baton hit his sword midair, and eventually his sword came down my arm, cutting my fleece and caught my hand on the way out. So it was at that stage where I looked at my hand and saw that it was open and my thumb was hanging in a natural position. And so I had no choice to frustratingly withdraw at that point to control the bleed.
As the now injured Inspector Campbell retreated, Monzo scrambled over a garage and dropped down into the garden of the house that was in Franklin Gardens. He then began hopping fences until he emerged from Thurlow Gardens, where he was surrounded by officers who, at this point, were finally able to restrain him with their tasers. This came approximately 20 minutes after the maniac's rampage had begun. In the meantime, the ambulance team had since attempted to resuscitate schoolboy Daniel Anjorin, their effort having lasted approximately 20 minutes. Sadly, however, despite the best efforts of the paramedics, as well as of the nurses and the doctors who took over Daniel's treatment once the boy reached hospital, at 8:40 a.m. that morning, the schoolboy was pronounced dead. So yes, Marcus Monzo committed his 20-minute spree of diabolical violence, which included the murder of an innocent 14-year-old schoolboy. Under the influence of both cannabis and conspiracy theories, those two things having caused the man's obvious psychosis. So what, in the 36 years that he lived before doing what he did, went wrong with the man? He grew up in a comfortable home alongside his brother Eduardo, their mother running a successful clothing business. After going to university, the two brothers set up a clothing company of their own, which proved relatively successful. The two were in their 20s when their family moved to New Hampshire in America, but the whole family no doubt suffered a serious setback in their plans for their future when the two brothers learned that they didn't have the legal right to work in the USA. After moving over to the UK, Monzo caught schizotypal personality disorder, or SPD for short. SPD, like other personality disorders, is a long-term mental health condition where someone's thinking and behaviour differ significantly from the norm. Psychosis happens not to be a common feature of SPD, unless you smoke God knows how many cannabis joints a day or consume other illicit substances on a regular basis for years, exactly as Monzo did. To be precise, the perpetrator essentially spent almost a decade in a drug-fueled haze. The man practiced martial arts, jiu-jitsu, as I mentioned, but in 2006 he suffered an injury which brought his martial arts career to an end. As a result, he took up yoga and persistently searched for online gurus, all in a bid, initially, to improve his technique. These searches, however, soon led him onto a journey into spirituality. But yet, he was, at the same time, beginning to experiment with more and more drugs. Cannabis, LSD, and magic mushrooms proved to be particularly to the man's liking. Monzo no doubt believed that he was becoming more spiritual, whatever that actually means, and more enlightened, whatever that means. But in reality, he was just evolving into a paranoid lunatic who swallowed just about every conspiracy theory that he met, no matter how crazy any of those theories may have sounded. On returning from a spiritual retreat in India, furthermore, the antagonist started to behave with sky-high levels of arrogance, swanning round as if he was the keeper of all knowledge, but no less taking more and more illicit substances, which were, as you might imagine, doing nothing more than to frazzle the man's brain. In 2021, Monzo travelled to northern Brazil for another spiritual retreat, which involved him staying with indigenous Amazonian tribes. Whilst there, he drank copious quantities of a certain brew that contains potent hallucinogenic qualities. The man was able to smuggle some of this substance back to the UK, where it's completely illegal, and drink it daily on top of all the other drugs that he was taking. Adopting some truly deranged beliefs, the antagonist travels to alternative festivals around the world. This included breatharian events in Italy and Denmark, breatharianism being a markedly warped belief system where people don't eat. And yes, a number of breatharianists have literally starved themselves to death. Interestingly, nobody at those demented gatherings liked Monzo. They found him arrogant and cocky with the odious habit of talking down to people. He would interject himself into conversations, trying to act like some sort of guru, or, as I say, the keeper of all knowledge. The sheer number of conspiracy theories that Monzo subscribed to is truly staggering. The man believed that the earth was flat and was controlled by Jews. He believed in chemtrails and said that thoughts were actually controlled by ancient AI. He believed in satanic cabals and said that the Pope was a lizard, of course. He reckoned that Elon Musk and Hillary Clinton had both been replaced by Illuminati replicas. A practitioner of urine therapy, the man habitually showered in and drank his own piss. Between his piss showers and his piss drinks, he reached out to Andrew Tate, praising the man's rhetoric and defended Hitler. On his TikTok profile, he described himself as a, quote, mystic, musician, martial artist, Jedi and a ninja, unquote. On the point of his allegedly being a ninja, Monzo frequently posted pictures of samurai and ninjas. As time went on, Monzo completely cut himself off from his family and friends. The only people that he had anything to do with were those who reinforced his delusional beliefs. I've no idea, really, whether or not the man was into the martial art of Bushido, the way of the warrior, or the way of the sword. I can 100% confirm, however, that the man was 100% into violence, and that his samurai sword purchases, of which there were a number in fact, were of course for the purpose of enacting violence, killing and hurting as many as he could on a day when it felt right to do so. That day, as we know, was the 30th of April 2024. The place, as we also know, was the villagey outer London area of Hainault. The innocent person who fell victim to the perpetrator's murderous behaviour was a boy who attended a private school in Woodford Green, played football, rugby, hockey and cricket, had reached grade 6 in violin and grade 5 in piano, had a strong circle of friends and was described by his school after his murder as a true scholar with a positive nature and a gentle character. This was, in fact, the second time in less than a year that the school in question, Bancroft School, had to cope with the murder of either a current pupil or a former pupil, the ex-pupil concerned having only left the school a year or two before. Moreover, there are eerie parallels between the killing of 19-year-old Grace O'Malley Kumar from June 2023 by paranoid schizophrenic Valdo Calacane and the killing of Daniel Anjorin by psychotic, cannabis-addicted you-know-who. On Thursday the 4th of May 2024, Arsenal FC, the team that Daniel supported, paid tribute to him during their game against Bournemouth, with a round of applause resonating around the stadium during the 14th minute and with banners being displayed, all in Daniel's memory and honour. Daniel was laid to rest on Friday the 17th of May 2024, the boy's funeral having been held at Jubilee Church in Ilford. The family, friends and teachers of the boy were among the people, who numbered over 100, who turned up to say their goodbyes. Could the boy's murder have been prevented in the first place? Monzo, the murderer, had no prior police record. But he also had his heavy drug use, his cannabis addiction standing out in this regard, his heavy personal investment in conspiracy theories, his passion for and commitment to violence, and no sane people in his life to be guided by. I think all this answers our question. When Monzo was taken into custody, he was still high and still rambling about God, telling the police additionally that he had an alternative personality of a professional assassin. After being charged with murder and with other offences, the man was initially sent to Broadmoor High Security Hospital to receive treatment. Afterwards, he was sent to prison on remand to await his next court date. On the 2nd of May 2025, the antagonist pleaded guilty to possession of 2 swords on the day of his deadly rampage, but pleaded not guilty to all the other charges against him, including the murder of Daniel Anjorin. The grounds for his plea was diminished responsibility, the argument that, at the time of his acts, he was suffering from an AMF, abnormality of mental functioning, which came from a recognised medical condition and which caused him to be unable to understand his actions, form a rational judgment and exercise self-control. When the argument of diminished responsibility is successful, the defendant is convicted not of murder but of manslaughter, which usually gets the person a much lighter sentence than murder, or instead of any prison sentence, a hospital order, which is actually what Valdo Callicane, that treble killer, got. Monzo's diminished responsibility claim came from his SPD, which he argued caused the psychotic episode, which in turn caused him to do what he did on the 30th of April 2024. The prosecution, however, countered that, as I mentioned earlier, my own knowledge coming from others who possess the requisite expertise, of course, I know nothing myself. Psychosis isn't usually a characteristic of SPD. An SPD sufferer only becomes psychotic, usually through the regular consumption of illicit substances, including cannabis, Monzo's all-time favourite recreational drug. In the law of England and Wales, drunken or drugged intent is still intent. It's no defence of any kind to say that you only killed or harmed because you'd voluntarily got yourself high or drunk, exactly as Monzo had. On the 25th of June 2025 at the Old Bailey, Marcus Monzo was found guilty of the attempted murders of Donato Iwule, PC Yasmin Mecham Whitfield and Cindy Arias. He was also convicted of the wounding of Inspector Molloy Campbell and of Henry Polania. Most importantly of all, he was found guilty of the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin, the prosecution's counter-argument to Monzo's claim of diminished responsibility, which, if successful, would, as I say, have got the man off his murder charge, winning out by a mile, the jury then being anything but stupid. At Monzo's sentencing hearing, which took place on the 27th of June 2025, Daniel's father, Dr. Anjorin, read out, before the perpetrator's sentence was passed, his victim impact statement, which read as follows: "We will not see Daniel obtain his GCSEs, his A-levels, or go to university. Daniel had so much potential to excel in so many areas. He could have been a great scientist, financier, or a business founder. We won't see him get married or have children, or the normal things that parents hope for their children. All these hopes and aspirations have been cruelly snatched away from us through the wicked actions of Marcus Monzo. As a family, we have all had difficulty coming to terms with Daniel's loss. Daniel's grandparents have also lost a much-loved grandchild. Daniel brought great joy to them through his academic success, his kindness and his thoughtfulness. Daniel's death has brought great sorrow and sadness to their lives, and they miss him immensely. The cousins have lost a close family friend and playmate. Daniel's school friends have lost a dear friend. As parents, one of the most painful aspects of Daniel's murder is sometimes seeing the pain of Daniel's loss in our children's eyes, knowing that they are thinking of him and missing him." Unquote. Dr. Anjorin's statement to the press from after the sentencing hearing that is, again shows his and his family's ongoing love for Daniel and the heavy grief that they bear over the boy's loss. In this statement, Dr. Anjorin shows the same calmness and composure that he had shown all through the trial, and for which the trial judge, Mr. Justice Benathan, paid the man a well-deserved tribute.
This has been a painful and deeply traumatic chapter in our lives. No verdict or sentence can bring back our son Daniel, who we loved so dearly, but we are grateful that justice has been served. Daniel was taken from us in a way that no family should ever have to endure. His life had so much potential ahead. He was gifted academically, was kind, and had a generous spirit that touched everyone who knew him. We carry that light with us even in this dark time. We want to express our deepest thanks to the police, prosecution team, and all those who work tirelessly to seek the truth. Your dedication has meant more than words can fully convey. To everyone who supported us through this ordeal, friends, family, our church, our workplaces, our children's schools, and even strangers, thank you. Your love and support has been a lifeline. We honour Daniel's memory, not in the shadow of this tragedy, but through the love and happiness that he brought to us and all those who knew him. Thank you.
I believe that thanks to an online fundraising exercise, Daniel's family have been able to move away from Hainault to start over somewhere new without having to see the spot where their boy, their precious child, was so viciously murdered every time they step out of their front door. Mr. Iwule still suffers with both physical and mental pain, experiencing flashbacks and being unable to sleep. Police Constable Meshem Whitfield has been left with very severe injuries and deep trauma. A series of operations have not fully restored her use of her left arm, and she defined, in her own victim impact statement, the numerous ways in which her life has become poorer and the numerous pleasures that she's no longer able to enjoy. Cindy Arias wrote that she has been left with constant anxiety, stress, sleepless nights and deep, persistent fear. Henry Polania, meanwhile, states that over a year on, he's still waiting for further surgery on his hand. He suffers with anxiety and panic attacks and is unable to return to work. Inspector Campbell, meanwhile, has told of his numerous trips to hospital, his pain, and his only gradually recovering some of the use and movement of his hand. He's concerned that his wife has had to bear the burden of looking after both their child and him. All these facts were cited by Mr. Justice Benathan before he passed sentence. And what sentence did he pass on the perpetrator? Understand that the murder of Daniel Anjorin was Monzo's lead offence.
The life sentence I must impose for the murder of Daniel Anjorin will also have a minimum term that you must serve before the parole board can consider whether it's safe to release you on licence. They may decide that time will never come in your case. I have considered the Sentencing Council guideline for all the offences other than murder. For all these sentences, I will reduce the term you would otherwise have received by 10% or slightly more to allow for your previous good character and the fact you were psychotic at the time of offending. Those offences will all be concurrent to the term of life imprisonment, but nonetheless, I need to specify what each will be. For these counts, I sentence you as follows.
For the attempted murder of Donato Iwule, 25 years. For the attempted murder of PC Yasmin Mechem Whitfield, 31 years. For aggravated burglary, 7 years. That offence relates to the fact that Monzo entered into the home of Henry Polania and Cindy Arias as a trespasser and then committed GBH with intent against Henry Polania. For the attempted murder of Cindy Arias, 21 years. For wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm of Henry de los Rios Polania, 7 years. For wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm of Malloy Campbell, Inspector Malloy Campbell, 8 years. For possession of the two swords, 12 months for each offence. For possession of a bladed article in a public place, that relates to the kitchen knife that he stuffed into his van, 5 months imprisonment. And for the murder of Daniel Anjorin.
On the basis that a person who had committed all the dreadful offences of the 30th of April last year would attract a minimum term of the order of 50 years, I reduce the term I impose on you by a fifth to recognise your mental ill health and previous good character to 40 years. From that, I have to deduct the number of days already served. Therefore, the sentence I pass for count 2, the murder of Daniel Anjorin, is life imprisonment with a minimum term of 38 years and 309 days.
Having been sent down at the age of 37, Marcus Monzo won't be able to apply for parole until the age of 76. I just feel so sorry for Daniel. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.